Hello friends, myself Professor Vinod Pillai. Welcome to Java programming session. In today's session, I'll be showing you more details about how to do inner classes in Java. Inner classes is one of the topics in Java which is not normally you'll find in most of the textbooks. Okay, so I have selected this topic. Recently I cleared SCJP 1.6 and I found that most of the questions, like almost 5% of it, or you can say 233 questions are coming from inner classes, and you'll not find much resources regarding inner classes in the books, in most of the books I want to say. Okay, so in this session I'll be showing you what different types of inner classes are there, what types of questions can become, and what are the answers you can expect of those things. Okay, it's not much difficult, but it is one of the rarest topics being discussed in the textbooks. Okay, so let's get into it. Inner classes. Okay, first and foremost, it's quite possible in Java to create a class inside a class. Okay, that is the concept comes from there. It comes the concept of inner classes. There are four major flavors available of inner classes. That is, it's quite possible to create a class inside another class. It is possible that to create a class inside a method of another class. That means I'm having a class A, it is having a display method. It is quite possible to create class B inside the display method of class A. Okay, there is a concept called anonymous inner class also. We'll see how to create an anonymous inner class, and it is quite possible to put a modifier static in front of the inner class, and some people do call it as a static inner class, but officially there is no such concept of static inner class, but you can call it like that way. Okay, so we can say that inner classes is available in four major flavors. Let's see how exactly it looks like. Okay, so it is possible to create a inner class inside a inside a class. So it looks something like that I have a class called outer class. It is having another class as inner class inside me. Okay, now the question comes quite obvious in your mind, is like people generally avoid these concepts. Okay, but you will find that anonymous inner class and all those things being much used in Androids. Okay, so one, you can say one place where you can use anonymous inner class, or you can say one place where you can use inner classes, is that you have some particular features or functionalities or methods which is very much closely tied with particular class only. Okay, that means you want to use those functionalities in this particular class only, and you want it to be specialized with that class only, then you do think about the concept of inner class. So keep in mind that thing, but in generally in industries people used to avoid this concept. Okay, yes, it is true, those who are in programmers of Android, they know that they have used this inner class concepts. Okay, mainly in anonymous inner class for the event handling in the buttons in Android. Okay, so let's get into this. So we got an idea that the inner class is used for the features which is closely tied with the particular class. Okay, so we do think about an inner class concept, so we create a class inside a class. Okay, so it looks something like this, that I am having a class and I am having some another class inside my class. So at the background, what happens is when you compile the outer class, but obvious you can't compile the inner class because it is inside the outer class, you have to compile the outer class. If you compile the outer class, what will be happening is you can expect something like this. Okay, a class file is created for outer class, but that is quite obvious. Now you should know that thing. This is quite strange, but the inner class file name will be created something in this way, that is outer class, the name of the outer class, $sign, and then the inner class name. Okay, so this is quite tricky, but you should know this thing. Okay, now let's get into that. First let's see how it looks like. Okay, then we'll see how methods can have inner class and all. Okay, so I have already coded most of it. Okay, I've divided the four major parts and I've coded accordingly. I'll be explaining you all the parts. Okay, don't worry, because if I code in front of you it will take too much time. So let's get into this and I'll explain you how to do all those things and what I have done exactly. Okay, so let's start it in a simple way. I'm using Eclipse. You can use any of the IDEs, or you can use stick with the editors. Okay, I have created a class. I'm having a private variable. I've created obviously because I want to show what it can access and what it can't access. Important thing is you have just concentrate this particular part. I'm having a class inside a class. Okay, so it is quite possible to create a class inside a class. Now I am having a private variable ans inside my inner class. I'm having a get method which is public inside my class. Okay, now forget about this thing. Okay, rule number one, it is possible the inner class can access any private public methods of the outer class. Okay, so it will act like a normal variable or method of the outer class. Okay, so I can access the display method. Okay, so when I write display, I'm not having any display method in inner class, but it's still able to access it because I am having a display method at the outer class. Okay, so it is easily, it can access any variables and methods of the outer class. Okay, now you will be thinking it is public, so it must be accessing. No, even if it can access the private variables. Okay, so I'm having an access 200, I can access system.out.println. I'm saying outer class as this thing. Okay, so rule number one, outer inner class can access private, public, any methods, any variables or methods inside it without any problems. Okay, the same rule applies to the outer class also. That means the outer class can also access the inner class private variables, public methods are from the outside methods. For that I've shown you this thing, but obviously it's a class, so you have to create an object. So I've created an object of inner class. I'm accessing the ANS variable, which is ANS is a private variable inside the inner class. So you should be clear now by this example that inner class can access outer class private and public methods. The reverse also applies, that is outer class also can access the private and public methods of the inner class. Okay, now this is fine, you have understood the basic understanding of this thing. Now the question comes how to access them. I mean, like, how to create an object of this thing. If you want to access only the outer class, that is simple, you create an object of outer class. That is in the main method I've created an object of outer class. Now as such, the inner class is a variable, or you can consider it as something like a variable inside my outer class. To access that, I have to create an object of outer class first. Okay, so I created an object of outer class. As to use the inner class, I have to create an object for inner class also. So I've created the object from where I've the one object which I've created for the outer class. Using that, I have to create an object of inner class. How? Outer class dot inner class, that is my class name. Okay, dot my inner class object, outer class object dot new inner class. This is the way I have to create an object of inner class. Okay, there is a, but obvious there is another shorter method. You can directly create it in a single line, that is outer class dot inner class in obj is equal to new outer class. So in runtime it creates an object of outer class. I am referencing that dot inner class. Then I can access the get value and whatever methods you want to access those things. Okay, so it is quite easy, I feel so. Now quite you can say, as you know, you can access the display method. Now something comes in your mind, that is like, if suppose what happens, the inner class do have a display method. Okay, this is quite a possibility that a question may occur. What will be the output? Okay, that is something like this. So what has I've created an inner class. It's having two methods. I'm referencing a display method, but obvious, if suppose the inner class is not having any display method, it will reference to the outer class display method. But as such, I'm having a display method, so what will be the expected output? Okay, first let me remove this and I'll show you what is the I'll run it and what I'm getting. Okay, so it's calling the outer display, because what I'm doing is, at the main method I'm creating an object of inner class. I'm calling get value method of the inner class. Let's see what is happening in the get value. Get value is calling the display method. As such, it is not having any display, it's calling the outer display, and then it is saying outer class value dot x, that is x is the my private variable of outer class. So my output is something like this I'm getting. So it's calling the outer class display, it's calling the outer class value dot 200. Now what happens if I'm having an inner class display? So I've changed the context. So let's see what happens. So fine, what is expected is that is only happening. Inner class is having its own display, so it will call its own display, and it's doing the same thing. Now there is a quite unusual thing happens, that is or you can say a requirement comes into picture, that is I want to access the display method of outer class. Now I'll be referencing some variables or something like that, then it is quite possible to create an object and do that. But how to do with this current object and all? If you doing an inheritance, you can call the super dot your parent display, so it will understand that I am talking about my parents display. Now here it is not possible because I'm not inheriting it. Okay, so what you have to do is like this, something outer class dot this dot display. Okay, so now it will understand I'm talking to whom. Okay, so now let's see the output. So it is first calling the outer dot display, then it's calling the inner dot display, because in the display I'm calling the outer display first, then inner display, and then 200. This rarest requirement, but it is quite possible that to do such things in Java. Okay, let's see. So our first task is completed. We understand like how to create inner class inside a class. Okay, let's see what is possible. It is quite possible. uh, before getting into more details, I'll just want to say about the access modifiers. That is also one of the different features. It works in different way in with the inner classes. Okay, fundamentally you have to understand that thing. Inner class is a variable, or you can say consider as a part of a class. Okay, a variable or a method like that. Okay, so as it is a part of class inside the class, so you can specify all the access specifiers or modifiers to what you can specify to a variable. Normally you can't never able to specify a as you all know that a class can have a access specifier as a public or a default. You can't put a class as private. Okay, it will say that it is not been allowed. Okay, so but with the case of inner class, it is possible. Okay, so you can create inner class as a private, or you can create an inner class as protected. Okay, you can even create an inner class as static. Okay, so the access modifiers which is applicable to an inner class is final, abstract, public, private, and protected, and static. Okay, this is quite, these two are mostly like, generally people feel like a class will never have a modifier as private and protected. Is true, but inner class can have it. So you just keep those things in your mind also, that with inner classes it is possible to create those things, because it will act as a variables or methods of a class. So it has been possible. Now let's see how it has been possible. I hope so I have cleared this topic. Okay, let's get into the second part, that is, it is possible that to create a inner class inside a method. Okay, generally people don't do that because it will limit your access. Okay, so it will look something like this. I'm having a outer class, I'm having its variables and methods. I'm having only one variable right now. I'm having a method. Okay, inner class method mnt. It is having its own variable, local variable, and it's having a inner class inside the method. So it is quite possible to create a method, create a class inside a method in Java. Okay, now why it is been you can say try to avoid, or you can say neglect it totally. The reason is, as and when you create a class inside a method, you can't outer class or outside the class or from main method you can't access it, because it is a local to that particular method only. So anyhow, if you want to access the inner class from which is being declared in the in the method, you have to do it in the method itself. Okay, so people generally don't do these things because its scope is very limited. So I have to create an object of inner class, then I have to call the get value inside this method. That means I can't access them even outside the, so if I do like this something, I can't access it because inner class is inside my uh, particular method. Okay, so I can't access those classes. So here the limitation comes. Once you create a method, a class inside a method, the outer class also can't access any of its private variables. It can't even create its object, it can't create its methods. Nothing is possible, but reverse is possible. That means still the inner class, the class which you have created, okay, inside the method, can access the private variables and methods of the outer class. Okay, so you can that's why I've still kept my private variable x, which is outside outer class variable. Still it is being accessed by the inner class method. Okay, so as such you can't create outer class inner class access. So I have created an outer class object, and I'm calling the method. Inside the method I've created an object. Okay, I've new, that means I hope so you understand that thing. That is a I'm not concentrating what is the name. I'm telling it to create a runtime an object. I'm referencing to that object and I'm calling that method. Okay, so what I'm expecting an output, so it is being able to access the variable. Okay, now this is quite different. This you should remember that it can't access REL. Now you feel like this is quite strange. Okay, the REL is a variable which is being created inside the method. It can't be accessed, whereas it can access the x which is created outer class variable. Okay, this is because you should know that thing, that the variable which is being created in the inner class, or you can say inner method, okay, that the method variable is a local variable. Okay, so it will be allocated in the stack. Okay, it is quite possible that the stack will be cleared and all the variables will be cleared out, so it will not allow you to access the variable which is local variables of the method. Exceptional is there. If you create the variable as final, it is possible to access it. Okay, so generally you should know this thing. If someone say in exam you see something like this, you should know it will show in a compile time error, because rel is a local variable unless and until it is being created as a final. Okay, so inner class inside a method can't access the local variables of the method unless and until that variable is being declared as a final. Okay, yes, it is quite still possible to access the method variables which are of outer class even though it is being as a private. Okay, so this is there. uh, Now you'll be having something in your mind that think that fine, that then the inner class still will have that those access modifiers like private, protected and all those things. No, it is not possible, because as and when you create a class inside the method, that class becomes act something like a local variable to that method, and inside a method you can't create a public variable. Okay, similarly inside a method you can't create a public class or protected class. The only two access modifiers applied to this inner class is final and abstract. You can't give protected, you can't give public, you can't give anything. Okay, only thing is possible is you have to create either access modifiers final or abstract. Okay, so I hope so the second part is being clear, that is how to it is possible the access modifiers we have seen in a class inside a method. What are the access modifiers possible? Now the third topic comes, that is anonymous inner class. Okay, okay, anonymous inner class is quite little bit difficult being explained in most of the textbooks. What I found is in different way. I'll try to explain in different my way. Okay, that is, consider this. If you understand a method overriding, okay, in method overriding what we are doing, we are having a class, parent class, we are having a child class. Child class is overriding some method of parent class as per his requirements. So if we reference to a child class object, when we call the display method of the child class object, when we even though our reference is of base class, but it is pointing to a child class object, that is polymorphism concept, and we call the display at runtime whichever object it is being called, pointing the display method of the that particular class is being called. The same happens with anonymous. Okay, uh, just try to understand that concept only. We are having an outer class which is having a display, and it is having I've written outer class. I'm having an inner class, but here no inheritance is there. Okay, now strange thing happens, you will be feeling like this statement. This is an old style of creating anonymous inner class concept and all. Outer class obj is equal to new outer class. I'm not creating an object, you should remember that thing. New, I'm creating a curly braces. Here, from here I'm creating an anonymous class. You should know this concept. Okay, public void display, I'm creating an anonymous method, or you can say a function overriding concept here inside in this thing. System.out.println and a semicolon here. Okay, so obj will act something like a local variable to that class, and inside that I have created an anonymous class, and it has overloaded the method display. Okay, so when I call inner class my obj equal to new inner class my obj dot obj, that is my object, the variable dot display, it will call the anonymous methods display. Okay, and I'll be expecting an answer of anonymous class. Let's see this. So I am getting this thing. Okay, so it is quite possible. Now in function overriding, if I think so, if you remember, if I am calling the display method, if the child class has not overridden my display method, then what happens is it will automatically call the parents display. Okay, and if you see here, it is calling the outer class display, because I have overridden display 1, create a new definition only display 1. Okay, and I'm calling the display method as such. This inner class is not having it, but the parent class display is having it. Is been automatically being called to that. So you just remember this thing with display, with the overriding concept. Okay, now the question comes in some people's mind is that whether it is be possible to create another method inside here, like it is possible in overriding. Okay, now it is quite possible to create it. Now the question comes, how you'll call it? Okay, because my obj, if I try, as you say, I'll call it like this way. Okay, now it is not possible because my obj.obj will reference to in like a the same concept of polymorphism. It will go to the parent class, it will check with it. Okay, here you can't even check it because the reason is it's anonymous, the class name and all it is not there. Okay, so you can't call the method from outside. Okay, but there is one thing possible, that is this display can call its hem. Okay, let's see the output. Okay, so this is working. Okay, basically people feel like that in anonymous class creating new methods didn't make sense. Sorry, but this is one possibility is still remains, that you call the display method only, but display method is calling its own new created display one method. Okay, it is possible. I hope so I have cleared you the inner class also, anonymous inner class. Okay, so here no class name is there. Here a runtime a class is being created, I am referencing to that particular class. The semicolon is quite important, you should remember this thing. You will find this same code with threads. Most of the times in exams you will find like something like runnable obj is equal to new runnable, and you all know that runnable is an interface. Okay, and in the curly braces you will find public void run method. Okay, so I'm not implementing interface, I'm not implementing, but at runtime I'm implementing creating a class which will implement that interface. You can't, as we all know, you can't create an object of interface. Okay, the same happens here, but you'll feel like you're creating an object of inner class, but you're not basically creating an object of inner class, you're referencing it, and at runtime anonymous class is being created. You should know that thing. Okay, let's get into the last topic, that is what happens with static modifier in a class, or you can say how to create a class of static type. Okay, let's change all this thing with those. Okay, now here what happens is there is no such concept of static inner class. It is being called like that, but basically it is possible to have a modifier in front of a class of type static if the class is created inside the another class, as I've told you. Okay, so I'm having an outer class, I'm creating a class, but I'm putting access modifier as static type. Okay, so what advantage I'm getting, and some disadvantages also there. What advantage I'm getting here is like to reference this inner class, I can, because as such it is a static, it will act something like a static variable. To access static variables you simply have to call it with class name dot the variable. So to access or to create an object of inner class, I simply have to say outer class dot inner class obj equal to new outer class dot inner class. I don't have to create an object of outer class. If you remember, in the first statement we have created here an object of outer class, then we have reference to the inner class, but it is not required because as such our inner class is a static class. Then I can access the display method. That's one advantage you get here, but one disadvantage, as such your it is been as a static in a class, so it applies the static rules and regulations. So a static method can access only a static variable. Okay, so that means I can't access now rel, because rel, oops, if I try to access rel, it can't be accessed because cannot access a static, make a static reference to a non-static this thing. So unless and until you make this thing as a static type, okay, you can't access rel as this thing. Oops. Static integer rel equal to this thing. So now I can access because rel is being changed to as of type static. So you remove this thing. If you create a class in a class and put access modifier static, it will act something like a static variable method. Okay, so you can access it directly, but it can only access the static variables. Okay, so let's try what's the output, and so I can access it easily. Okay, and I can access the rel also. So in the inner classes I have cleared almost all the topics which is generally been covered, okay, or most of the concepts of Java. Okay, in this session we have seen we can create an inner class inside a class, we can create an inner class inside a method, and how to create an anonymous class, and what about a static modifier in front of a inner class. Okay, if you have any queries you can just put a comment, or else you can post an email to vinodthebest@gmail.com. I'll put all these codes with codings into my blog. So if in case you want to have the codes, okay, so I'll be putting all these codes there also. Okay, so in the from this particular blog vinodthebest.wordpress.com you can get all the codes. Okay, and for any other comments you can post it there also. Thank you and have a nice day.